Alright, we are back with more NBA coverage, and while the only ones I've watched live from this week ended up taking place on Wednesday, that doubleheader that they had on ESPN actually turned out to be something pretty special. Both of those games, in their own unique ways, were competitive, and both of them ended up being down to the wire overtime finishes that saw at least two teams, of course, naturally in this situation, come out on top. And for at least one team, maybe a pair of teams implicated in this, especially when you get towards the second game, there are still lots of questions surrounding them, no matter who ended up winning or losing that game. But to get into the Hawks-Pistons, probably the more exciting, if you will, game of the night, man, it was looking scary for the Pistons after a while. Now, again, I did not watch the first quarter of this game. I ended up getting there as the second quarter was underway. And from right then on, it was all about Jalen Johnson cooking. He was not only doing what he traditionally does in terms of being the tone setter as a facilitator pretty much all night long. Like, there were way too many times where, especially in situations involving Onyeka Okongwu in that second quarter, he was just fucking diming these passes through and threading the needle exceptionally well. Something that you would not expect in years past, decades past, from a 6'8 forward. But that is what Jalen Johnson has been doing all season long. And to that point, I wasn't sure whether or not he actually scored some points. He made you forget about that instantly. This man was just getting any shot he wanted out there. He was taking people in the post. Not necessarily a three-point shooter by nature, but he converted on a couple of those, and before you knew it, he ended up being the driving force for a 15-point second quarter individually, and just a complete and total takeover for this Hawks squad. That three-point shooting went a long way, and coming into this game, that was going to be a strength over this Pistons team with some of the runs that they had. They had a 17-5 run in the middle of the second quarter. They had an 11-2 run as they were taking advantage of those open three-point looks to compound some easier takes for guys like Dyson Daniels, who also isn't the strongest three-point shooter, but loves to slash to the rim, loves to get those floater shots up and take advantage of his 6'8 frame as a point guard. So it just all clicked for the Hawks seemingly. And it put the Pistons in a little bit of the bind as this lead started to swell up. Because by nature, they want to get out and they want to run. They want to grind teams out defensively. They didn't want the Hawks at all, and that's how they were going to play it. They're going to be tough, right? The two-point conversions were not going to come easy for this Hawks team. And essentially, for a lot in the first half, they sealed it off. The thing was, without making Atlanta really think all that much, or double guess, second guess themselves, I should say, in terms of taking open three-point looks and maybe trying to force some shots in the paint, they gave them way too much space in the first half. Whether it be them sagging off or it be them having late-ass rotations, just being caught out of position in that front, the Hawks were always just a step ahead. And when you can put a team like that whose whole identity is to play that slow, methodical, physical defense, they used every aspect of that against them. And hey, considering what this game ended up being, you'd be surprised to hear that the Hawks took a lead as large as 21 before having a three-pointer from Duncan Robinson, one that they absolutely needed, come with 4 seconds left in the quarter. So it was looking scary. 71 to 55, 73 to 55, in fact. Hawks were seemingly running away with it. The thing is, even without Cade Cunningham being out on the court, if there's one thing that you can't say about this team, is that they lack heart. Like, they saw that staring down a barrel at halftime and just decided, you know what, nah, bump all that shit. We're going to start imposing our will in this game because we aren't about to let them run us out of our own fucking building. And you proceed to have Jalen Duren getting down in transition, even on one occasion. He and I believe it was Asar Thompson did a great job of trapping one of their ball handlers out for a transition possession. They catch CJ McCollum, it was CJ McCollum, trying to dribble the ball, trying to make a play for his teammates. He loses control of it. They just hound him. And before you know it, Asar Thompson's out and running for a dunk that trims the lead all the way down to 6. And that kind of momentum, that physicality from Duren, that overall defense from guys like him and Thompson, and even Tobias Harris getting into the mix, doing what he does as the veteran presence on the squad to kind of set that tone from a 3-and-D standpoint. Before you knew it, he ended up tying the game as the Pistons, with that blend of playing to their style and pressuring the Hawks far better in the second half. As the broadcasters pointed out, they went on a 27-5 run to start out the second half and the third quarter from that sense. Now, the Hawks, it's not that they weren't still trying to shoot the ball. They were. But again, the key, you just have to get a hand up. Make them uncomfortable. Make them think twice about getting these shots up. Force them to play your game. You want to shrink the court? Okay. Open up the paint a little more. But disguise it. Make them collapse down. Make them have to come forward to a rim protector like Duren or an all-around defensive force like Asar Thompson and see what happens once they get inside that three-point line. Then it gets tricky. Then we have ourselves a ball game. It was back and forth from there on out, to say the least. But this is where the separator kind of diminished a little bit, and yet at the same time, in the biggest moments and clutch time, you felt it. But the Hawks, in spite of all this, they did still have their own rally towards the end of the third quarter as they managed to take back the lead because of Gabe Vincent just sparking up, making a crazy amount of three-pointers in a row. I don't think I would have ever expected something like that, but he pulled it off, and they needed those to just create a little bit of distance. But the Pistons were right there every time. You know it's something when you can have Jalen Duren literally get a fucking putback dunk to end off the third quarter in perfect fashion. And that is when you knew right then, right there, we were in for a hell of a fourth quarter, I should say. I was interested to see how the Hawks utilized Kuminga in this game. Now, granted, there was a metric saying that they were undefeated when they played him, but it's games like these and it's scenarios like these where Jonathan Kuminga, even with everything that's happened, still has a struggle. Because on the one end, while he can go in isolation and he can take it up against the player like Javonte Green, like he did in one of his earlier buckets in the fourth quarter to go get himself an and one opportunity, you then have some of the situations that follow. He still struggles to space the floor. And there was also a scenario where it just kind of put everything in the perspective for me. You get Jalen Johnson to swing a beautiful corner pass over to him, but he can't handle it. He fumbles the ball around a little bit, and now all of a sudden there's a defender on him. So in a moment of what he feels is desperation, he tries to make an excessive play, and he just catches himself in a weird situation for any ball handler to be in. I think they challenged the play in question, and before you knew it, Jonathan Kuminga was just taken out of the game a short time afterwards. Now, the game was still close. It's not like his presence in the game completely affected what the Hawks were doing, but it's clear that, taking him out just before they reached the clutch time point, as a reserve player, it's like, okay, the Hawks want to have faith in him, but there are still many strides that he has to take as a player before he can be trusted to enter the game in those kinds of sequences. And I think that's reasonable to say. Especially with, again, the Pistons just continuing to breathe right down their neck without fail. Like, for every Dyson Daniels floater that you get here, you also have Paul Reed just magically being able to get a shot up. It was crazy. The Pistons, for a while in this quarter, they were starting to get out and just completely dominate them in transition. But once we got into the clutch time period, it tempered down a little bit. And this is where you have to give massive credit to a guy like CJ McCollum. And I think this is where a little bit of the separation comes in between the guard play for both teams. Now, of course, the Pistons are still without Cade Cunningham in this game. And until that situation actually gets rectified, he shouldn't step on an NBA court. So you can't put any blame on him. But I think with a veteran presence like CJ McCollum in this particular game, even though he had been kind of rotting on the Wizards, even though with the Hawks he's more of a bench player at this point, he harkened back to some absolutely big-time sequences. He was taking on isolation possessions by himself and absolutely going to town on this Pistons team when it mattered the most to keep the Hawks alive. And before you knew it, he was just filling it all up. I think the craziest thing in the situation is how he ended it. He's literally out here taking the ball with a dribble on the baseline, trying to sit up there, steps in for a shot, and draws the foul on Jalen Duren for a fucking and one on a fadeaway to give the Hawks a 5-point lead with 44 seconds left in the game. And it was like that consistently for at least a 3-minute period. Before you knew it, you hear about him having an 11-point fourth quarter. And with all of the different players that have made an impact on the Hawks that I've been talking about in previous recaps, you wouldn't have expected that from CJ McCollum at all. But he is that steady, calming presence that they can rely upon when they need it. And it felt like in a game that presented a lot of chaos, that ended up being huge for them. Meanwhile, for the Pistons, it's not to say that he had a bad performance, but they brought this idea up at several times. Dennis Jenkins is a player who has done tremendous for the Pistons this season, especially as a sixth man. It's why he got a standard contract extension earlier in the season. It's why he's placed himself in this spot, and it's why he started to gain a little more trust from the coaches. His role for a little bit was going to be questioned with Cade Cunningham out. And as I mentioned, although it was just a one-game sample size, it felt like they just kind of swung it around a little bit in terms of the distribution assignment. It was more by committee. They didn't have any one-man lead that. It felt like at times in this game they were trying to get that kind of energy from Dennis Jenkins. And I mean, he started this game to provide them with more of an instant scoring punch and kind of be that ball handler for them, especially when you're starting all wings in the center and Jalen Duren alongside him. You're not expecting Asar Thompson to always do it, although again, with him and Amen being former guards, they could. It just hasn't proven to be as great. So you put the ball in the hands of Jenkins. Okay, he does come out and does provide you with some pretty solid ball handling. However, there's a downside to that. A lot of his turnovers, he ended up having 6 in the game, they came as a result of him trying to, regulate the game with the same kind of speed that he would impose when he's coming off the bench leading the second unit. And it's a tricky thing. Now, maybe that's always been his style, but at the same time, that was not the kind of offense that the Pistons needed from him in that moment, especially when they be looking to slow down the game and take on high percentage shots. If you're in Jenkins' position and you're rushing everything, it just makes everything on the Hawks end, especially with the kinds of defenders that they have, much, more perceptible in terms of getting a read on what you're doing and making an instant play on the ball. And it affected them a lot earlier on. It tempered down a little bit in the fourth quarter, but you still had remnants of it. Nonetheless, even with all that back and forth, you have to rise up in moments like these and make plays. And it would be Duncan Robinson getting a three-pointer to bring the game within 2. It would be Tobias Harris putting Jalen Johnson in the post and walking him down to tie up the game. And before you knew it, we were going to overtime. Just like that. CJ McCollum couldn't convert the 2-point shot. And just like that, you have extra time between 2 gritty teams. One in the Pistons, who, again, are near the top of the Eastern Conference. They've already established themselves as potentially the real thing, or at the very least for their fan base, something to actually look forward to over the course of the next few years and in the moment. It's been a massive season for them, but this Hawks team is just as lethal. They just have to find the consistency, something that has always eluded them, of course. Overtime would tip off, and you would have the wings and Johnson and Harris get the scoring started. But from there on, it was all just trying to tighten up the entire court, making sure that every single shot was contested, not open, making sure that every single player had to work just to get off of a different defender and off of the different coverages out there. The Hawks, though, even in spite of all that, were able to go on a 5-0 run, very short, very light, to take themselves a 5-point lead as you neared the 2-minute mark. Asar Thompson would, in yet another situation too, there were multiple times, because Asar Thompson, with him just being a prime-time athlete, is going to be able to leap over everybody else. There were earlier sequences where CJ McCollum was trying to get back in transition and contest his shot. All he had to do was leap up for the bucket right over his head. A little scoop layup. You get a similar thing here. It was 3 times in this game you just have Thompson get up and over the defense for a lob that goes in for a 2-pointer. It was insane. And that was a bucket that was well timed. Brings the game within 3, and everything starts to get murky from here on out. Dennis Jenkins, to his point, again, lethal scorer, gets the bucket and gets past the defense to bring the game within 1 here. But then, after getting the stop that they would need on an otherwise scorching hot CJ McCollum, they bring the ball down and they call a timeout to set up some defense. Okay. They attempt to run a play, and they attempt to have Dennis Jenkins look for what I would suppose is a 3-point shot at that point. However, Daniels smartly on their end, I guess they were considering this. The Hawks had a foul to give, and so he just hacked the shit out of them. Make them reset. I like that. Make them think about it a little bit. You trim half the time down. Now you're only working with 4 seconds if you're the Pistons here. You have to get very creative. And the pathway to making a successful play is made that much more difficult. He had to try, though. They had to try. And they looked to a similar direction. You get Jalen Johnson in the post, guarding up on Tobias Harris again. And this time, although Tobias Harris gets a pretty convincing look, Johnson is stuck right on him. He gets a much better contest on this play than he did to end regulation. And it forces at least the trajectory of the shot to go off to the point where it clanks off the rim as we near the triple zeros. Only Jalen Duren, with a single second left, did manage to get the quickest rebound imaginable. He was trying to tip it in and end the game. For a split second, it looked like it had the distance. Only it ended up being just short. It hit the front of the rim. Something that had been automatic for Jalen Duren all night long. And in that moment, he ended up missing it. It was tough for the Pistons. And a hard-fought win, hard-fought game for both sides. That's a hell of a statement from the Hawks. Again, understanding that you have constantly been living in the middle over the past few years. And with everything that's gone down so far, this is an opportunity to take that next step moving forward. I can agree that it was a big statement for them. And this Hawks team, again, even with that defense being stretched out all the way, they still found a way to come back and win. And that speaks volumes. For them in this game, they shot 47.6% from the field and had 18 three-pointers, which again, most of that damage came in the first half. But against this Pistons team, that is a tremendous disparity right there to have. And that did help them to win the game ultimately. Dyson Daniels had 16 points, 13 rebounds with a career high, 8 offensive, and 4 assists with 2 steals. Just a hell of a game from him as a hustler on 8 of 14 shooting. Love to see that. CJ McCollum had 27 points and 5 assists on 10 of 21 shooting with 5 threes. Just a crazy time for him. I would not have expected that. But he got the job done. And Jalen Johnson had 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 12 assists on 9 of 18 shooting with 2 threes. Nickeil Alexander-Walker also chipped in 21 points himself with 3 threes and 9 of 18 shooting. As for the Pistons, I mean, in their situation, yes, they are going to naturally struggle a little bit. This is still something that even if you want to consider, okay, the Hawks by record are going to be a team as of the recording of this video that is near the play-in conversation. They're actually the 6th seed right now, a half a game in front of the 76ers, so that could be a little interesting. They could be a playoff team, they could be a play-in team. They're right on the fringe. They're still pretty damn good, and this Hawks team had been hot over the past month. So to be down by 21 points, circle all the way back, and go on a 27-5 run to open up, to bring this game to overtime, and to put forth the spirited effort without a player regarded as your best and your franchise cornerstone, that is also something that the Pistons should take into account. You live to see the next game. You can't harp on every single thing that transpired in this. Obviously, there are things you want to improve upon moving forward. But with the context in mind there, you did everything that you could possibly do. Mistakes, positives, and all. So I would consider that there thinking about that right now, especially as they move forward. They're still atop the Eastern Conference. They're still, they just recently, in fact, clinched a playoff spot confirmed. So they're rolling regardless. It's just a bump in the road, an obstacle to take into account. But if you're the 1 seed, and again, you have to deal with a team like this. Again, the Eastern Conference has been regarded as inconsistent, even amongst the strongest teams. So anybody can beat anybody. But you still have the utmost confidence that you can take a team like this down again if you face off against them in a series. If you're Detroit. Dennis Jenkins, again, 19 points and 10 assists isn't half bad at all. But the 6 turnovers stick out like a sore thumb, unfortunately. Again, that's a natural struggle to have with him being more of a scoring guard and not necessarily a ball handler who cannot conform to the same slow, tactical pace that Cade Cunningham likes to operate with. That is a difficult adjustment to make, admittedly. Jalen Duren had 26 points and 14 rebounds on 9 of 15 shooting. I know he wants that game-winning shot back. That's still a hell of a performance to put together as well. Tobias Harris also had 22 points on 9 of 17 shooting with 2 threes, and Duncan Robinson had 17 points and 7 rebounds. Zara Thompson also chipped in 18 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 steals in this game. Aside from the 3-point percentage, there were some extreme advantages on both sides. The Pistons, of course, are going to want to bang that on the paint. They had 76 points in the paint in this game compared to just 50 for the Hawks. But again, you could stretch the floor like that. You don't need to worry about that all too much. That cancels that out completely. The Hawks were turning the ball over a little bit more, and again, as the game went along, the Pistons were able to get the advantage in points off of turnovers overall. Still, even then, they just fell a point or maybe a couple short of potential victory. And that, again, is a feeling that is tough. But, man, you'd much rather want to be in a situation where you are going wire to wire with a team right now. Because, in essence, that is exactly what you are about to experience in the next few weeks. Yes, the Pistons, if they are the outright 1 seed, might get an opponent that could be an easier draw than most other teams in the Eastern Conference. But you're going to get that 8 seed's best if this is how things shape up. So again, you have to learn from that. Absolutely. But also understand that, again, you took that on without your best player. You're probably about to get him back. So you're feeling okay with this. And hell, the Pistons, it doesn't stop there in terms of the tough matchups. In fact, they have a game against the next team, one of the next teams that I'm about to mention today at 5:30 on ABC. That should also look to be just as gritty of a defensive game. Now, that team as well, when you look at this Houston-Minnesota game, this is another one where you have people personally regarding it as a game of the year candidate. I will say that, I guess, in Tom, as I'm thinking about it, just a few days removed from watching the game, I'm like, okay, I can see why people would view this as a good game. And maybe I needed to come to that conclusion about it because in the moment, as I was watching this game live, even though we know what the identities of these teams are, I found myself so confused and flustered at what I was watching for most of this game. Most of it. Now, some of the stuff may not surprise you, but again, there was always a new wrinkle, seemingly, with this. Main thing is, though, gotta give respect to the Ohio State man and Michael Conley Jr. He was starting in this game. And he actually did well. He was a part of a 12-4 run to open the game for the Timberwolves, as he actually made some sneaky steals on his end to get out in transition and allow the Timberwolves to convert those easy buckets at the rim. And it put the pressure on the Rockets early because, again, they, oh man, there's just too much context. There's too much context. And I'm just going to sound like a broken record. They could not protect the ball to save their lives. They couldn't. This has just been a games-long stretch now. Maybe something that's going to define their season is that when it matters the most, they are putting the ball in harm's way all the time. And again, maybe that's a symptom of them not having a true point guard. Fred VanVleet was there in person, obviously on the bench, obviously out for the season with a torn ACL. That's not something you can control, but boy, even if you have your own reservations about Fred VanVleet, everyone knows that he is a damn good, pure point guard. And he can control an offense and what they do and how they operate. He can do what he needs to do to get those star caliber players in their spots. He understands all of those nuances of playing that position in ways that most other guys on this team cannot, because they never played the position or they don't have the experience in the NBA to get themselves accustomed to this instantly. Like a Reed Shepherd, despite how good he's been in his second season. In any other context, if he was on a different team that wasn't in win now mode, I should say, I'm sure that Reed Shepherd would probably get much better recognition. But this Rockets team, clearly, when you go out and you get a man like KD, you're looking to take that next step as a true championship contender. And that's how the odds shifted as soon as they got him in that massive 7-team deal. Now, on to that note, even though it wasn't all about him, as the Timberwolves started to take, a bit of a lead in this game, especially in the first quarter, it was relatively slow. There wasn't too much scoring involved. And it's crazy to see because KD was chasing history. He got the first field goal, or a field goal early, I should say, after an 0-4 start, when it was mentioned that he was set to take 8th place all time for made field goals in a career past Dirk Nowitzki if he got at least 2 buckets in this game. I'm out here talking my stuff, suggesting that, man, this is easy for Kevin Durant. He's going to get this within the first couple minutes of the game. Well, you get into the first quarter, and he's struggling. It was 1 of 7 from the field. You get into the second quarter, and he's still chasing it. And I'm like, what? He's struggling like this? This is Kevin Durant we're talking about. This is not something that I'm accustomed to. And it was crazy to see him have what might be considered for him as an aggressive off night. Once that happened, it threw everything off for the Rockets. Now, again, you have to credit them as a bunch of guys, whether it be Jabari Smith Jr. or Alperen Sengun, stepped up in the second quarter tremendously to keep things afloat as best as they could. Neither team was shooting the best, but they were able to, for quite a while in this game, go blow for blow with each other. And the Rockets were certainly grateful of having that happen. Because before you knew it, you get towards the end of this quarter as they continue to grind each other out. That's their goal. Both of these guys are centered around controlling the glass and controlling the paint patrol. 100% on both sides of the ball. And it was like that back and forth throughout the entire game. Especially when you look at what the Timberwolves are able to do with Rudy Gobert. Nigga had 6 blocks or something like that in this game. Just swatting everything. When it came down to, again, you struggling to shoot, you're trying to look for something a little easier, a little more routine, and you step into the paint, you think you have an easy shot. No, you don't. The main thing from him was that the Rockets just weren't consistent enough on their approach. Like, yes, they were able to limit the dynamic scoring, but you proceed to have Rudy Gobert, for example, just put the fucking ball on the floor, take dribbles, and get himself contested layups at the rim. You tell me when he's ever been able to do something like that. And they just allowed that consistently throughout the early portion of the game. But yeah, Jabari Smith Jr.'s 9 points in this quarter and Alperen Sengun's putback helped them bring the game within 1, despite all of those struggles. Mainly marked by, again, poor shooting and a lack of conversion on the second chance opportunities. But also, you have to give the Timberwolves credit. Even if we just want to punch down on the Rockets and say, oh, they outright struggled. They had no business participating in this game. No, they were there. And they understood that KD was looking for that record. And they had Jaden McDaniels for most of the night take that assignment individually. Rarely did I see many other people, aside from moments where they look for a switch. That's how close McDaniels was to Durant all around the court all night long. He gave him no breathing room to operate, to take him to that signature mid-range pull-up shot. He had no room to work with at that point whatsoever. And I give McDaniels a ton of credit for that. Man's consistently been one of the premier wing defenders in the league for the last couple seasons. Potentially longer than that. And so he's garnered more than enough trust at this point to take on a player and guard their best man, their closing threat, their bona fide scorer, who is regarded as one of the greatest in NBA history, specifically for that trait. He shut him down. It wasn't all, oh, KD can hit that easily. No, it's like, do you see how Jaden McDaniels is consistently in his grill, using the perfect technique, sliding his feet, matching Durant step for step, without hesitation. He did that all night long. And so it created for a game that really didn't have that much separation. The thing for Minnesota for a while is that as the game progressed, they had a massive advantage in points off turnovers because, again, Houston cannot protect the ball when it matters. And they were playing sound defense. The only thing was that, again, in this back and forth of just chaotic proportions, there was always something. Neither team could really separate themselves from the other. Even when you had these steals and it would result in an occasional good bucket, there were just as many situations where, for example, you get in a tie ball game after the 9-minute mark, okay? You get a steal on KD's end, and you quite literally have Alperen Sengun miss one of the easiest layups of his life. Then you have Julius Randle pull the ball down, try to get on a transition and run, and he throws the stupidest fucking pass to the corner out of bounds. It was shit like that, where, okay, something positive is going to go your way, and then you just have the team absolutely blowing on their end. That's the chaotic portion. And that's where I'm like, okay, Yes, I'm confused, I'm frustrated, I'm all different kinds of emotions, and I'm not even a fan of either one of these teams. That is the levels in which those are the levels in which we were getting towards at this time. It was wild. Like, that's how you know this is some dead ball era shit. A 55-55 game near the 6-minute mark of the third quarter. You understood that, again, the game was going to slow down tremendously. And, again, from that standpoint, knowing that, I probably could have approached watching this in a much different lens. Like, I'm familiar with how they want to play as teams. And it still just threw me for a loop as to how we got ourselves in this position that consistently. It was crazy. Oh, man. But, the intensity was full out on display. Whether it be Amen Thompson and DiVincenzo damn near trying to scrap and then having them go back and forth at each other with a succession of buckets. You had Amen Thompson get his shit packed by Rudy Gobert. Like, there was just a lot going on. And I guess from their perspective, you don't want these games to be pretty per se. They're not going to turn out that way. But as long as you come out on the winning end, for them, it might be all that matters. And as we neared the end of the third quarter, for just a split second of time, the Timberwolves rather, belted out to a 7-point lead. Then you had the Rockets storm right back with Jabari Smith Jr. Continuing to be a quality player for them. Like, again, this is the thing with the Timberwolves. The advantage at a point swelled up to 14-2 in terms of points off turnovers. And you still have the game this close, a 2-point lead heading into the fourth quarter. So I'm like, at that point, something has got to give. Something. And you'd get a lot in this fourth quarter. You would get a lot. Man, I tell you. Yeah, just going back and forth with each other consistently as Donte DiVincenzo would start to light it up, and even Julius Randle himself would get another bucket to go. Before you knew it, it would be a while before the Rockets would even get themselves on the board, and it took one Ohio State man and Jayshawn Tate to make it happen. Now, I feel like it's been a while since he played. I'm not even going to lie to you. And while he can serve that role well for them on a team full of 3-and-D style wings, there are also moments where it's like you still have to question why he's in the game. And that happened immediately. I mean, you couldn't go multiple minutes. You get him, for some reason, just shoving around Rudy Gobert randomly after he'd been on a little bit of a colder streak. And I just, that's yet another thing where it's like, okay, I guess it's not all that different from Bones Holland literally trying to give Dorian Finney-Smith a bear hug in transition. Then he was so perplexed at what the fuck had happened and how he got a foul called on himself. I think they overturned it, actually. It's just like, what are we doing? All this other stuff that has to pertain to the slower pace of basketball on top of just everything else outside of that realm. Meeting in one environment and taking center stage on national television. It was fucking chaos. The Timberwolves were trying to get this team out of there, and it was looking for a while like they were going to have success doing it. I mean, consider this. You have Rudy Gobert continue to perform well. You get a T on Jayshawn Tate for that aforementioned incident. You are continuing to pile on all these points, and you are continuing to work the hell out of these poor passes from the Rockets. They get out in transition, and they have Jaden McDaniels take it up to an 11-point ball game. That would serve to be a 13-0 run for the Timberwolves in that moment. And at that point right there, I thought that the game was done. Considering how the Rockets have struggled in these moments in clutch time, I thought it was over. But as is always said, no lead in the NBA is truly safe. And I think this game represents the epitome of that. You want to know what proceeded to happen next for the Timberwolves? They had 4 turnovers in the last 5 possessions of the fourth quarter. Oh, and not to mention, they allowed Kevin Durant to start catching fire, settling into those rhythm shots that we know he could hit. That was the real KD right there, not whatever the hell else was happening earlier on. He started to settle into that, and he actually helped them to take a lead. He was going to work for them, to be the closer that this Rockets team wanted him to be. And again, as we go further in the game, I can explain the alternative notion to that. Because again, they make a good point, and even their own coach makes a good point about it. But the Timberwolves, with all this going down, they themselves surrendered a fucking 13. Like, that is just a crazy swing to go through. You go scoreless for all that time, and you surrender a 12-0 run to the Rockets, essentially. It took a little bit of chaos, but Julius Randle would get the go-ahead bucket. And then, in the final few seconds of the game, in regulation at least, Rudy Gobert, quite literally, because I'm like thinking as soon as they get back on defense and KD gets the switch on Gobert, you already know what time it is. Do you know how many times in the last 5 years, and even going back further through Rudy Gobert's entire career, where you've had these different star players take advantage of the absolute mismatch in coverage that he presents every single time? They cook his ass. You can make an entire compilation of it. It is literally the game plan that some of these teams have after a while. Go put Rudy Gobert in a pick and roll, get the switch on a dynamic ball handler, and let him go to work. And that's what this was shaping up to be as soon as Kevin Durant got the ball in his hands. He actually made Rudy Gobert dance around a little bit. The nigga was stumbling. He was stumbling. I shit you not. He had him for a second. But Rudy Gobert, I guess, feeling himself a little bit, turning it back to those DPOY caliber days, I suppose he wanted to have a little bit of a change in behavior for this particular moment. Not only was he able to recover, he fucking blocked KD in the clutch to buy them another chance, seemingly. Only they allowed the offensive rebound. But okay, the Rockets were able to get the ball back in that situation. Alright, you have to set it up again. Can only defend Rudy Gobert for so long. And I'm just sitting, thinking, and saying in this moment as I'm watching the game, because again, chaos, frustration, all the emotions in that moment. You are Rudy Gobert, and you cast off those preconceived notions about your defense on the perimeter in that moment, the play before, and as they are inbounding, you actively sabotage yourself and your team by just randomly wrapping Schengen in a fucking chokehold. There's no reason to grab him up in that moment, and he proceeds to get called for the foul. That ends up being a 6th foul. He fouls out of the game. Now the Timberwolves have to go small. And I'm like, Nick, you have to use your brain in that situation. So, they set that up. Now we're in 9 seconds left after KD made the free throw. At the worst possible moment. What's new? What's new? You quite literally put the ball in KD's hands here. They lose it. Naz Reid, playing the small ball center, actually gets a clean steal on a chaotic ass inbound from the Rockets in the first place. And now they're sprinting. They're rolling back as they pass the ball all the way up the court to Julius Randle, and he thinks that he's got the game-winning layup in his arsenal. But Alperen Sengun, for a man who they say out there is immobile and can't jump, he elevated for one of the higher verticals he probably would have recorded in the NBA to get up and block the absolute shit out of this Julius Randle dunk and proceeds to fall face first on the floor. They get up, they pan the camera over to him, and his entire mouth is fucking bloodied. That's some that's some hard-nosed basketball right there. I can't even sit here and lie to you, and I'm feeling the same way in that moment. That was a prom time highlight for me. That is the game-saving block. Literally. And again, through all of the ugly components within this game, you extend it with even more madness. You keep it going. Overtime begins, and overtime is owned by the Rockets instantly. I mean, you were looking at damn near two different teams from how they were performing in the rest of the game up to that 3-minute, 30-second mark in the fourth quarter into overtime. At least the first half of it, I'll say. They were getting some very fundamental passes to go. They were working their offense in such a fundamental way. And at the 3-minute mark, they gave themselves a 108-95 lead. So all the madness unfolds for the Timberwolves. You surrender that many turnovers in a limited amount of possessions. You have your game-winning attempt blocked by Alperen Sengun in regulation. And over the course of that period in the fourth quarter to the 3-minute mark in the overtime period, they gave up a fucking 26-2 run as a team. Now again, it's a game of runs. But especially with these high-stakes games, that is something that should never happen. That is unacceptable. Absolutely. And considering how well the Timberwolves have been playing defensively, you pick that moment right in the clutch time period to then shift that attention all of a sudden and start to completely alter your style of play then, allowing the Rockets to do that quickly. If they weren't getting in their own way in some of these occasions, Timberwolves would have just flat out lost this. And granted, there was still a chance for them to do so. But of course, you have to make it interesting. So what would the Timberwolves proceed to do themselves? Well, with the help of Kyle Anderson. Yes, Kyle Anderson. And also Dante DiVincenzo continuing to be a flamethrower. They actually tied the game back up. Oh, and Julius Randle, with 8 seconds left, played the bully ball that I'd like to see him play. And he got himself the go-ahead score to take a 110-108 lead. So you had an overtime period that, in the box score, could appear to be close. You have one unanswered run leading to another 15-0 run from the Timberwolves in overtime with the game on the line to take the 2-point lead and put the Rockets in position to lose this one now. You'd work that damn hard and you're still about to lose this. It's wild to me. But they still had themselves a chance with 8 seconds left. And again, I'm noting it. You absolutely need an answer. You need one. They put the ball in the hands of Kevin Durant, and he draws contact on the shooting foul. Oh, this is as good as money. Yeah, he's going to hit these 2 free throws. He missed the first damn free throw. They mentioned that KD, in fact, hadn't missed a single one all night. The Rockets were as accurate as can be from the line all night long up to that point. And I'm thinking to myself, it was Dave Pash on the call. He fucking jinxed him. He actually jinxed him. They were 23 of 23 up to that point. And he decides before KD goes and shoots these to let that be known. You know how the announcer jinx can get. And he did him something dirty in that situation. In all seriousness, though, like literally, you're there, you're at the line, and you miss, knowing you need both in that situation. Okay, so now you can't just settle for the one. You have to intentionally miss and try to get the ball back for at least an extra possession or an immediate shot attempt. You have no alternative here. And, well, Kevin Durant does exactly that. The ball is traveling out, and it proceeds to go off on a Timberwolf player. Do you know how agonizing? Like, that is just some of the craziest stuff. You're thinking the game is over. And again, at every moment, there was always something to suggest that, oh no. What you think is going to happen here is absolutely not. We're going to flip this on its head entirely. And we're going to make sure that for at least another second in this game, you're locked into watching it. You can't get away from this now. You want to know what happens next for the Rockets? As difficult as it is to work with just a single second on the clock, they get another horrible pass from the inbound, and they don't even get a shot up. And the game ends with the Timberwolves winning 110 to 108 in overtime. So again, for both teams, this game was seemingly neck and neck. And you should argue that it was. But again, for both of these teams, even with the result, like, neither team should come away from this being too content with what happened here. In my opinion. Yes, quality wins like this matter. And this was a game where the Rockets and the Timberwolves were fighting for pole positioning. They still sit at both 5 and 6 in the Western Conference as of the recording of this video. So a win like that, especially in a game involving these teams, does matter. I'm not saying that you can't give yourself a lot of grace for that in that regard. What I am saying is that these performances still just showed some of the flaws that both of these teams have. Especially more so for the Rockets. At least you have somewhat of an excuse with the Timberwolves not having Anthony Edwards in this game. But the damn Rockets. I mean, there is no way that they continue to have these problems. You can see that Alperen Sengun and Kevin Durant both had 30 points in this game. And that's fair and that's reasonable. Both of those guys could be your leading scorers. It's why, or part of the reason why they were both all-star candidates this season. But it is just an identity crisis in Houston right now. Overall. Yes, they want to out-rebound people, and they still can, but obviously that's going to hurt a little bit with Steven Adams being out. They want to control the paint, but they aren't always as efficient at doing so. They want to have a shooting presence on the outside. Your only real shooters are still Reed Sheppard and Kevin Durant. Nobody else is respected as much consistently. Jabari Smith Jr. hit a few good shots for them. But aside from that, not consistent enough to really focus on that defensively. And again, clutch time. They still now have a worse losing record in that mark this season. And it is every single time where even if that's the role that you want him to fill come playoff time, the fact that you are trying to make KD, a 37-year-old, have to go through single-handedly carrying the offensive load in the biggest moments repeatedly, that is taxing. It is taxing and it is not sustainable. Even Ime Udoka pointed it out. It sucks to have to rely solely on a 37-year-old to get this done when we have younger players who, in theory, should want to be hungry for those kinds of moments but aren't playing like it at all. And if the Rockets, again, no matter where they finish, man, if they want to improve their finish this season and they want to go on a deeper playoff run, they are going to need to sort that out. And the fact that they haven't, and we are in March, nearing April, it makes things very, very bleak for this Rockets team moving forward. They clearly have the pieces to get there. But everything is just out of rhythm right now. Everything. And they've got to fix that. Jabari Smith Jr. added 16 points and 12 assists, and Amen Thompson had 11 points and 10 assists with 2 turnovers, which actually isn't the worst, but he shot 4 of 8 from the field. Reed Sheppard shot 3 of 13 from the field himself. It's like you're constantly getting in your own way. In your half-court offense, I mean, there were literal stretches in this game. You saw it. How the hell do you go radio silent after starting out on a blazing hot trajectory in overtime like that? You go radio silent because you can't generate anything in the fucking half-court. And it was like that multiple times in the game. Yes, again, that might have to do with them not having a true point guard. Okay, there is just, like, consistently, they had no answer on that front. And it was borderline embarrassing. Borderline. I tell you, dude. As for the Timberwolves, they are also just as inconsistent. Even with Anthony Edwards being out there, they are just as inconsistent. How do you lead in points off of turnovers by that margin for most of the game? And then still, with your lack of consistency from the three-point line, with your lack of consistency on the defensive end, when you'd been imposing that for most of the night, you also find yourself in this close battle for some reason. If they had been performing better and more efficiently, like they're accustomed to doing, they would have smoked the fucking Rockets in this game. They would have smoked them. It's as simple as that. And when they go through those cold streaks as a team, that is when you see the Timberwolves at their worst, especially offensively. Now again, you don't have Anthony Edwards out there, but everything slows down for them. They can't get into any sort of rhythm, and they allow these teams to storm back and get some big-time wins against them. Now again, the Rockets and this Timberwolves team were probably an even matchup in every sense of the word. But it is not a good sign to go through a game like that knowing that you had the advantage elsewhere. And even though they shot a little more effectively, to again be that inconsistent with the ball in your hands when you've been pressuring Houston like that, and to surrender multiple runs to Houston. A debilitating one of 26-2 that shouldn't even be possible. And it happened within essentially 5 minutes. And some change. That kind of shit cannot happen. And it's not something that you would want to see if you're a Timberwolves fan at this point. Because we're nearing the playoff schedule. You understand how he went out last year with the Timberwolves again having the ball forced out of Anthony Edwards' hands and being placed in those same positions by the damn Thunder in the postseason last year. Same thing, same kind of mentality, and it got them again. This Timberwolves team, they have to harness that consistency, especially on defense. That's where they want to live. Because everything else for them crumbles if they can't do that. And I mean everything. As far as this game goes, though, Julius Randle had 24 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists on 10 of 17, or 11 of 27 shooting. Like, that is fucking wild. Jaden McDaniels had 25 points on 10 of 17 shooting with 3 threes. Dante DiVincenzo had 17 points and 5 threes. Even more chaos, Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid had 14 points each with at least 13 rebounds each. But they both were the victims of fouls. Rudy Gobert fouled out, and during that run from the Rockets in overtime, Naz Reid was actually ejected by Scott Foster. To add even more to it. But I guess that's just a lesson learned, even in my confusion with it. That game, and of course the Hawks-Pistons game, just represent all that you're about to see in the next few weeks. Yeah, when it comes to some of the free throws, you hope that some of the referees will not try to take the fucking game over and will allow these sequences to play on. Fair. But for the most part, you aren't getting pure basketball. You're not going to have as many easy shots as you once did, or at least shouldn't, in playoffs. Everything is going to ramp up. Defenses are going to tighten up. And as an offense, it's going to be more difficult on you to break through. You're going to have to get creative. You're going to want the ball in your best player's hands consistently, but you're going to have to get creative to work around that. And ultimately, hey, that defense is going to carry a long way. No matter what happens in a game, it's about adjusting, and it is about doing whatever you can do in a key moment to effectively outcoach another team. Because in the playoffs, this is where the superstars and the stars are made, and where you start to separate the genuine contenders from the fake pretenders. With the way that those two games went, and with both of those teams being in the playoff conversation somewhat, you get two good examples of teams that, especially for the Eastern Conference and the Pistons and the Hawks, nobody expected them to be here. But before you know it, they're going to have to start playing like it. They're going to have to settle down into that kind of condition through a full series where you're getting those punches from those other teams. And you have to be durable enough. You have to be strong enough. And you have to be tactical enough to take that and deal back a counterpunch. The knockout blow. Over and over and over again. So it's going to make things pretty interesting. Those are some solid matchups to go through. You know, again, it was chaos with that latter one, but I guess you can say that both of them were pretty good games. Anytime you can have a doubleheader like that and in overtime games back to back, you're doing something right. So I have to give them the utmost credit with that. Now, for some other developments. The Raptors, per Charania, signed Markelle Fultz to a 10-day contract a few days ago. He was actually with the Raptors G League affiliate. And I'm just like, wow, I can't believe that. You hadn't heard of Markelle Fultz in quite some time. And it just continues to add to the sadder trajectory his career has taken overall. This man was literally recognized as a top prospect in that draft. Literally. And then with a wrist injury that fucked up his shot, that he couldn't necessarily control, it changed the entire course of his career. Markelle Fultz is still going to be in a situation where, even with that brief time in Orlando aside, he was never really able to get that chance to truly break out as a quality player in this league. Like, to know he came all the way from there to the damn Raptors, man, it is tough to consider that. Genuinely. As for the Bucks, I've been hearing about a lot of different things there. For starters, per Charania, they actually waived Cam Thomas earlier this week. And I'm not going to lie, I did say on the record what I said about Cameron Thomas. I don't take any of that back for a second. But what I will say is that at the very least, the man is at least granted a chance to truly prove himself. And the fact that you get him for cheap, you don't have to worry about paying him all that money, and you still, after just a few games, don't even decide to keep him. I mean, he was there for 18 games. And yes, his start to his tenure with the Bucks was exceptional. Honestly. Now, yes, you do not like to see that he only converted on just 27.5% of his three-point shots. But with his role as a sixth man, it seemed for a while like he was fitting right in with what that team wanted to do. Then, of course, you have to understand that even the Bucks don't know what the fuck they're doing. And that front office, again, they need to go. I'm standing on that shit. They have to fucking leave. Because at that point, whatever you think about Cam Thomas is whatever. You actively have your superstar in those earliest games, especially lobbying for him to stay. And you waive him. He didn't even really get a chance to go out there and establish much of anything. If you're going to take him off and not at least allow him to serve through the rest of the fucking season. I mean, there is literally nothing you lose if you are the Bucks by doing that. At all. If you are able to continue to get high quality play from Cam Thomas in that position, you can retain him for cheap on a potential long-term deal. Knowing the limited amount of money you have, like, you are that close to the end of the season. The Bucks are not making it to the playoffs. You're as good as done. So I don't understand. We're this deep into the year. You couldn't afford to keep on Cameron Thomas for just a little more time. Just a little more time? Like, that's the wildest stuff to me. And it's just, again, continues to make you question what is going on in that organization. Now, there wasn't a lot of merit to this component of it as well, but there was also a mention that there, again, with the idea of, Giannis rejecting a shutdown for the rest of the season, apparently that rubbed ownership the wrong way, and there was an alleged report about him threatening to trade him, which, again, I don't know how true that. I have to look into that. But if that is true, that's even more outlandish. And again, I hope that Giannis as well, again, he's not that kind of player who's going to come out and say it, but I hope that he is taking every single thing he's seeing into account and understanding that he should not, even though he wants to be loyal, even though he wants to be a player known for, playing for and retiring with the same team, that Bucks team who took a chance on him as a completely raw overseas prospect. He wants nothing more to finish out his career with them, I should say. But you can't witness all of that and still have it in your mind that you should stay. There's no way he can be seeing that and suggest to himself that it is much better for him to remain a part of this organization than take his talents elsewhere to someone who is actually willing to commit to his needs as a player, who understands his will to win and desire to win, and will do everything in their power to surround him with, or maybe might already have the team to go out there and win the whole damn thing. That's what this all comes back to. And the Bucks, again, with all this shit, they lost the plot a while ago. They already seem to be out of their mind. So this I guess is nothing new, but it just adds to it. During Monday's game versus the Mavericks, which the Warriors actually ended up winning in overtime, Moses Moody would suffer a torn patellar tendon, and he is going to miss the rest of the NBA season. I mean, man, it was going so well for Moses Moody, especially over, this last stretch, over the month and some change. I mean, for a while there, his three-point shooting had been an exceptional tool on this Warriors squad. And hell, in that game, he was still, even when he was out, one of the top scorers in that game overall. So, while, again, we've consistently talked about the inconsistencies with some of these younger Warriors players, at the same time, this was a season where he truly put together a career year. I mean, he got more attention, and yes, some of that is due to maybe the fact that Stephen Curry was out. Some of that is due to the fact that with all of these different rotation changes, maybe Steve Kerr finally, after a while, came to a conclusion that he should start Moses Moody over a guy like Brandon Podziemski, as Podziemski for a while had been coming off the bench in the games that Moses Moody was playing. Fair enough. Regardless, most starts that he's ever had in his career to this point with 49 in a single season, and he averaged 12.1 points on 44% shooting, with 40.1% shooting from deep, by far a career high of his. So he was truly emerging as a little bit of a three-point specialist. And his defense was always there too. You don't have to really take those numbers into account, even though he's averaged 1.6 stocks per game. But he'd been a solid defender all year as well. So you're losing two of those kinds of roles in one player. It's highly unfortunate. And I'm sure Moses Moody wanted to close it out the right way. Not have himself go down on a stretcher and have to be carted off the court. He was emotional about that. And Draymond Green, say what you want about him, but he was a good teammate here. He consoled him. He was by his side as they were trying to, get him on the device and then move him out of the stadium, as the game overall was resumed at that point. So that was nice on his end. Because, man, it's just, like, damn, Moody. That is just tough, bro. I hope that he can return stronger from all of this. Because a torn patellar tendon, that is a rough injury to suffer. I think that goes without saying, but, man. We have a brief follow-up in that the bidding process and the exploration into new venues for expansion per Charania was approved on the meeting on Wednesday the 25th. Again, they needed 23 of 30 teams to vote for it, and with that would come an approval. They met that minimum threshold, and boom, just like that. Even though, again, it's not too confirmed yet, they're trying to figure out, okay, what are the next steps? What venues are we looking at specifically? How do we want to go about constructing them? How do we want to go about, I guess, just fully leaning into this realm of expansion that we haven't dealt with in more than 2 decades? And not only navigating, putting a team back in Seattle, giving them their access to their old rights as a franchise and their old history as a franchise, but also navigating the LA market and putting a team there as we proceed to have other teams, get their footing in the entire complex, like the A's. Knowing the Aces and Golden Knights are there already, the Raiders are there already, and you factor in an NBA team now on top of all that. So that's a lot to take in, but I am definitely excited for that. Also, although I have to look further into it, per Charania, there was a post mentioning that a trio of anti-tanking concepts were presented to the Board of Governors on this same Wednesday meeting as well. And granted, with the memo that they had sent out on their part, the NBA at this point, just to make sure the message was clear that you could not get away with doing this anymore. At that point, you understood that something like this was going to be in play for them, and I suppose they are taking themselves seriously in that regard, to at least get the ball rolling on it. They mentioned that there is a May meeting in which those kinds of rules will be voted on for real. But as for right now, they're just throwing these ideas out there, seeing exactly, I guess, what the overall conversation about it is. From what I saw initially, looking at the same post, I will be as blunt as possible about it and as honest as possible about it. They look terrible. They look terrible. I'm not going to bullshit you. But I personally will read more on them and potentially in the next video address them in a deeper sense to get a feel for exactly what they're trying to achieve with them. Because that's the fairest thing I can do right now, rather than just coming to you and making this the final regard where I'm just saying, oh, they're just outright garbage. Like, no, I've got to look into what they're saying. I've got to look into what their mindset is and how they're trying to approach it, to then say this or that in regards to how exactly it all makes sense to me and how it makes sense for the league in general. But that'll do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.